This is episode 110 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Kevin Amolsch. Kevin is the president of Pine Financial Group. He formed that in 2008 after leaving a small mortgage company. And now him and his companies have closed over, it's always more when I do the bios, over 2,200 transactions as a buyer, seller, or private money lender. They have access to a lot of private equity. He spent more than 20 years as an investor, 16 in lending, and he's also the author of 45-Day Investor and the host of Real Estate Educators, which I was on. All right, Kevin, welcome to the show.
Jonathan, I'm so excited to be on this side and have another conversation with you.
Yeah, I love it. We were just saying before, it's cool to go on each other's podcasts because then you come in with a completely different view. You know, as a host, you're doing one thing. As a guest, you're responding to the host. So yeah, I'm excited to have you in the hot seat as I was for you. Yeah. So let's start here. When was the first time that you realized real estate could be a vehicle for your future?
Oh gosh. So I learned about real estate reading books like many of us have. And I was just looking for some type of investment. I had a small amount saved up. So where can I invest it? And I ended up getting turned on to real estate. So I just started absorbing, books. And then I bought my first house. I was still in the Army at the time, but it was a place that I could move into when I got out of the Army. And then I rented out the bedrooms, let them pay my mortgage for me. 2 years later, I moved out and I kept that as a rental. So that was my very first rental property. I was 23 years old and I saw the value of real estate investing. I saw the appreciation of the property. I was making $350 or $400 a month in cash flow. My tenant was paying off my mortgage. And that's when it really sunk in. All the books, what the books are telling me to do and how successful you could be is actually real. You can actually do this. And so it was at that time that I really figured out that real estate is real and real estate is going to make me rich.
Did you have any idea about the scale until you actually got the first check and was like, wait, this does make money, like you said?
Yeah, I had no idea the scale that I was going to grow it to at the time. I was really just focusing on what should I do with this little bit of money that was sitting in my savings account. But here's the thing. I ended up turning it into a career. I never planned to do that either. I was just trying to look at maybe an investment. Maybe I buy one property every 2 years or something, which would change your life if you do even that. But I ended up buying 1 or 2 houses every single month.
Wow. Yeah. Even in the beginning?
Pretty early on, because I fell in love with it. So I started chasing foreclosures, and that's an interesting story, but that turned into a complete disaster. I am not... I'm not good at that. Yeah.
Well, let's go into that a little though. What were the biggest hiccups that you had with foreclosures? Were they courthouse steps buys or something different?
Yeah, no, I was not in a position to do that type of foreclosure investing. So I was definitely trying to get more creative so I could bring in some capital. It would be easier for me to bring in capital because I was in college at the time. My refrigerator consisted of a can of beans and a keg. I didn't have money to do the business. So what I decided to do is chase foreclosures on the short sale side, because I figured if I can get some short sales accepted, then I could attract some capital. Yeah. And I was learning all of this going to, the conferences and doing the mentorship programs. And I was trying to get help that way. Yeah. And so they just sold me, and they're like, this is easy. Not many people chase no equity foreclosures. So you're going to be on your little island. You're going to eliminate your competition, all of the things that you want to hear. And I finally got one. And what my coach told me at the time, which is terrible advice, by the way, but they said, you have to get the property under control. And the best way to control the property is to get the deed. Which is not true. You could get a control of a property with a contract, and you could literally do no earnest money and still have a legitimate contract, which I've learned all of this later. But at the time I was like, well, let's get the deed so I have control. The owner wanted $3,000 to deed me his house. There was no equity in the property. Yeah. He didn't deserve anything. And I didn't have $3,000. So I went and brought a buddy. I put in 1,000. He put in 2,000. And we were so excited. This is going to work. We got a deed to a house, and we didn't go out and get a loan and, all of these things. And then it's but for this to actually work, we got to create the equity. Now I got to go to the bank and negotiate for them to take less than what was owed on the property. And I really, Jonathan, thought that this was going to be a super easy process. And the bank was a pain. No, they were not, it was not a fun process. And I've done several since then, and it's all the same. You lose the paperwork. And this is back when there was fax machines, right? So you're faxing in this big
So how did you get into the lending side?
So I got recruited. I was borrowing private money, because I was doing, at that point, I was fixing and flipping, and I had multiple pieces of my business at that time. And I just got recruited to lend money. I love the financing side of real
Yeah.
estate. What I've learned is I enjoy putting deals together. I love the hunt, the chase, the kill, all of those things. And what I've learned is that you structure your offer, you structure your conversation with the seller. All of that has to do with the money. How are you going to finance it?
Yeah.
So I just kind of fell in love with that, right? And so I got recruited to be a mortgage broker, just a regular mortgage broker. And I was going to go in with a niche of working with real estate investors because that's what I understood. And then that was, the SAFE Act and all of that came in, and we had to start getting licensing and regulation, and none of that was there when I started.
Yeah.
And I was like pounding my head against the wall. But I decided, why don't I just be a hard money lender? I've already borrowed from it. So I just started raising private capital. That way I could control the underwriting. I can make common sense decisions. I can control the servicing of it. So this was back in 2006. And so I was doing mortgage broker and private lending. And then 2008 hit, and I was like, okay, I'm going to get rid of the mortgage broker thing. I'm going to focus on the private money lending. And that's when Pine was born. And yeah, here we are now.
Yeah. Well, let's talk debt funds a little, because that's obviously related to what we're saying. Explain what a debt fund is and why it's, especially right now, a very good option for investors outside of your traditional real estate investing.
Yeah. So this can be very confusing to people. So I want to be clear on what we're talking about here, because you have equity and debt. You can have an equity fund, and a debt fund is the investor's position in the fund. So you think about the investor going into the fund. Are you a debt or equity? But also, what are they investing in?
Right.
So you could be investing in debt or equity. So
that's
they're interchangeable.
Yeah, but people get caught up in that because they think, well, how can you invest in debt? And you're about to tell us.
Right. So when you're saying a debt fund, I assume like if we're investing in debt, so it doesn't matter where the money is coming from. Our investment is debt. Okay. Yeah. That's what we're going to talk about. So a debt fund is when I'm making loans to real estate investors. So this is a very secure position. We're always in a senior lien position at a low loan to value. So think 65 to 70% of the property's value. Now we like debt a lot. That's all we do because it's the safest place to be. We're the very first person that get paid. Now, are you giving up some returns to be in that position? Absolutely. Our investors make 8 to 10% return, and it's just steady, right? It's very steady every single month. On the equity side, if you're partnering, you're being a limited partner, you're investing in apartment syndications or any of those types of things, now you have some upside. We still see 18 to 20% returns on some of those investments, even in this environment. But you have the downside also. So I've got 5 on my own personal side, not the Pine side, where I've invested in syndications. So now I'm going in as equity.
Yeah.
And of the 5, only one of them continued to make payments as it promised. The other 4 stopped, and 2 of those 4 had capital calls. Now, capital call is when the sponsor or the owner of the asset says, we need more money to get through this, whatever challenge we're dealing with. So we're going to go to all of the passive investors, and we're going to require them or ask them to contribute more money, increase the size of their investment so that we could handle this. You never have that kind of a problem on the debt side.
Right.